Hi. So I've got kind of a two-part talk, actually. First, I'm just going to talk about a bunch of little gems I've made recently. And just kind of breeze through all of them and tell you what they're about and what I'm thinking. And you'll either go, well, that's weird, or you'll go, well, that's weird, but kind of cool. Or maybe you'll go, hey, that's perfect. I've been wanting exactly that. We'll see. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the way I like to build and release a gem, and how I've found that it's actually not as hard as I always think it's going to be. So, first gem, it's called Active Record Enum, which gives you a pretty good hint of what it's going to be. So, there's a special data type in MySQL called Enum. I know it's in MySQL. I don't know if it's in other SQL variants, but it's not standard SQL. So this is a simple example of an enum field. You can see there's the declaration, and then you declare as part of the column type what values are allowed. So this one, there's just two possible values that are allowed in this size column. And once you've done that, it's just pretty much a normal column. It basically just acts like a string for your inserts and retrievals and stuff. So we can just add a new row, value is large. It restricts you to only those values that you've declared in the the column type. So it's just sort of a little bit of non-standard SQL. It's a little crazy, like Rails is all about standard SQL and making everything portable. So I agree, like it's a little crazy that I want to be messing with these. There are other options. I'm not saying that you absolutely should use this gem. The simplest option is just to make it a string column instead and put an index on it, and it'll perform fine, and it'll behave pretty much the same way, and you'll probably be okay. You can use validates inclusion of, which is made for this kind of case too, where you'll, instead of saying in your SQL what values are allowed, you just put in your Rails code. If you want something a little bit fancier, there's a plugin I like called Symbolize. You can see an example here. You've got a class method called Symbolize. You give it the column name, and then you tell it which values are allowed. And then when you get and put things, set and get things, you use symbols, because that just seems like sort of the obvious thing to do when you have, when you're working with an enum type. It's symbols seem like the right Ruby data to get out. So I like this plugin a lot. I think it's very nice. It also gives you a whole bunch of extra stuff if you want it. You can get scopes. You can get like Boolean query methods. So you could say, gemstone.small ? And get a true or a false depending on if that record is small or not. So it's very nice, and really, that's actually a lot of the time you're going to be better off going with something like this. There's a bunch of other plugins as well that do varying degrees of this same kind of stuff, either validating the what values are allowed, or turning it into a symbol, or whatever. But maybe you do want to use enum. Maybe you want it for performance reasons. If you want to start a fight, you can probably find someone who says that enums are way better, and you can probably find someone who says that that's a stupid reason, and you can, we can get them shouting at each other at the bar, shouting about B trees and stuff. Honestly, I don't. Performance for me is something that it's not a huge difference unless you're, building Twitter. But maybe you want it. Maybe you're just a person who likes to have a really strong database structure, likes to say what you're doing in your database. Maybe you have other code bases that aren't as cool as Rails, or really need that enum in there to ensure your data integrity. Or maybe you just need to do legacy support. Maybe you have a ton of enum columns that you're kind of stuck with, and you can't just go and change them all like that. So you can just use the standard schema declaration to create an enum. So you do it like this. You just use the column, the generic schema method. And then in the type field, you just put that whole, you slap the whole enum in. So that's OK. That works. You can set up your database like that. But then you run rake, pretty much like rake anything. It seems like it regenerates the schema. And suddenly, crap. Rails doesn't know about the enum type. So it overwrites your schema with this weird declaration with limit 0. And it breaks, and your tests break. And you accidentally commit these changes because you just did commit-a. And it's just a huge pain if you're going to have these enum columns to constantly be having Rails spitting out bad schema that doesn't actually reflect what's in there. Just really a nuisance. So the solution, my solution was to tell active record about enums. So I made this little gem. So we plugged into all of the active record classes. And now we have in our schema, we can use a native enum type. The only thing that's a little hacky is that you have to use the limit is now the which values are allowed. I couldn't use a different name just because of the way that active record works. But still pretty nice. I've also set it up so that if you are using a different database adapter, it'll just default to a string column and continue to work just the same. So I think that's pretty cool. Right now it's Rails 3.0. I've got MySQL and SQLite adapters. I do set types as well, just because it's a similar problem, and it was a problem that I was having. And it's easy to solve both of those in the one gem. Things I probably will add at some point, Rails 3.1, the other standard database adapters. So yeah, just sort of a nice utility for any time that you have or want enums. Now, closely related is the next gem called active set. And I realize that naming is not consistent with the previous one, which is my bad. So now we get to learn about the Mysql Set Type. Similar thing, similar declaration. Again, you put which values are allowed. But this time, you can have some one or more, or 0 or more, of these values in a column. So we can insert a row that's with just one of the values. But we can also insert a row with more than one. And then the typical way to query a set column is with this find and set MySQL function. So here we look for all of the columns which have hydrogen in the set. And we're going to get, just one, because we have the second one is helium and hydrogen. If we ask for helium, we'd get 2. And if we ask for helium and hydrogen, obviously we'd get 1 again. So again, non-standard SQL. Maybe I'm crazy. But at this point, I was just sort of like seeing what I could do with these types. So this gem just makes sets act like they ought to act in Ruby. So you get arrays of strings, because that seems obvious. So we have the declaration access set up there, more of my inconsistent naming. And you give it the allowed values, and then you can pass in to the parameter an array of values. Or you can pass it in comma separated, or you can just pass in a string. You do whatever you want, and it kind of figures it out. You use this in conjunction with the previous gem to keep your schema clean, of course. So that's all I really have it doing at the moment. I could add more stuff. I could do some validation where I just automatically do the validates that all of the values that you're passing in are allowed. I could probably support some equivalent of find and set, and I could maybe do it. I could probably support it in databases that don't have the set type as well. I've considered a couple different tricky ways I could do that. but I haven't actually implemented anything. But I guess kind of what I'm wondering is, does anybody use SQL sets? Like, a show of hands, has anyone ever used one of those? No. All right. That's sort of what I thought. So it's why I haven't put in a ton of time into this gem yet, as kind of a playing around thing. So we'll see if I ever expand on it anymore. And just for a bonus, this is a real declaration. It really exists to protect the guilty. I'm not going to name names, but it's there. And if you look closely, you can maybe see why this is not the right way to use a set type. OK, next gem. This one is called tap out. We're on to a new thing. So the problem I was having was that I have a project with Ruby code and PHP code all in the same project, kind of cooperating together. And there's some PHP unit tests, but they never get run because, you know, I'm just using rake, and I do rake test, and it runs all my tests. And I can't be bothered to also run PHP unit. That's way too much work. So my solution is to run the PHP unit test from rake. You could just do it by calling the command line directly from rake, but I just figured I'd go for it and actually hook into test unit. So what we get is output like this, where so that first chunk is a Rails unit test, that second chunk is a Rails unit test, that third chunk is a PHP unit test. And it's picking up, since it's plugged right into test unit, so here I'm using the turn gem to do that formatting, it's picking up. If I was using red, green, or whatever, same deal. It looks like your native test unit tests. So this is based on the test anything protocol, which is something that PHP unit provides. It's actually originally a Perl protocol, I believe, but a couple other tools have picked it up, including PHP unit. So when you run PHP unit and ask for tap output, you get something like this. So you can see it's basically one line per test. It says OK if the test passed. If the test didn't, it says not OK. And then there's optionally some sort of YAML-ish stuff to give you more details about the failure and whatnot. So we can basically just pipe this right in. So I call out to the external process, and then I pipe the output back in and just parse it out and then fake up little test classes for a test unit. So this is my test class that I put in my unit test folder. So we include test PHP unit, which is the tap out class for PHP unit test specifically. And then my test class extends that. And then all I do is I call the class method PHP unit. I give it the path to point PHP unit at. So I'm just doing my whole directory because I'm lazy and I'm not going to write more than one of these. I could give it an individual PHP file or whatever I wanted to do. And then optionally, you can also pass it some command line parameters for the PHP unit call. So in this case, I'm passing it a configuration file to set up the stuff that PHP unit needs to run. So it's pretty easy to do, I think. It makes it really nice to just have all of my tests there and know that they're going to get run whenever I run my rake tests. So one thing I'd like to add is probably some more languages. Perl should be easy because, like I said, this was a Perl protocol in the first place. So all that it would really take is a little adapter to call the right external process, and then possibly a couple tweaks to deal with the differences in the output that's returned. TAP's sort of a loose protocol, so there's a little bit of wiggle room in there. But Perl should probably be pretty easy. I'm hoping I can get one of my coworkers to do a ActionScript class, because he's got some ActionScript tests that are also in our code base. So it'd be cool to get those in there. And maybe other languages. Seems like it would be fun. All right, one more gem. I won't spend too much time on this one because it's really tenuously related to Ruby. It is a Ruby gem, but it's not actually for dealing with Ruby. It's for dealing with JavaScript. So how many of you have used Greasemonkey before? How many of you have written your own Greasemonkey script? Okay, not too many. So Greasemonkey is pretty cool, as those of you who use it know. It's a Firefox extension, and the idea is really very simple. You basically just give it a chunk of JavaScript, and you tell it which pages to match to execute that JavaScript. And whenever your browser visits a page that matches, it just goes ahead and runs that JavaScript. So you can do all sorts of fun customization, get web pages to work the way you want them to work instead of the way that their author decided to make them work. This is a kind of a simple little Greasemonkey script, the way I like to do them. So there's that metadata up at the top is used by Greasemonkey, all these comments. So we've got a name, a namespace, which I think is just to avoid naming conflicts within Greasemonkey. Description. Then the include rule is the list of sites that match. So you do kind of standard globbing stuff. So in this case, I'm just running at anything at GitHub. The next rule, require, is actually a newer Greasemonkey edition, which I think they basically made so that you could use jQuery in Greasemonkey, because who doesn't want to write all of your JavaScript with jQuery? And it was kind of a pain before. You had to do these weird workarounds. So now with the require rule, when you install the script, Greasemonkey just knows to go to visits that URL and fetches the JavaScript and then includes it. So you see I have my JavaScript. I'm using jQuery right off the bat. It's ready to go, which is very nice. The cool thing is Chrome, you can actually just load Greasemonkey scripts directly. You don't even need a Greasemonkey extension. They just install as Chrome extensions, which is very nice, very helpful. But a couple things don't work, like the require that I just talked about, which made me sad when I had my jQuery extension and wanted to use it in Chrome. And suddenly it wasn't working, and it was a huge pain. Turns out that actually turning a little JavaScript file like this into a full-fledged Chrome extension isn't actually that hard. I always assumed it would be, because, I don't know, extensions seem hard. But all you really need is this little manifest JSON file. And you give that, and you give your JavaScript to Chrome, and you say, hey, package this up, and it packages it up, and you've got a Chrome extension. And I started looking at this file and thinking, that sort of looks like my Greasemonkey metadata. Sort of looks really, really similar. And I'm really lazy, so I don't really want to maintain all this extra stuff. So I just want to package it automatically from Greasemonkey. I just want to give it the Greasemonkey file, and I want to generate my manifest and have it take care of all that stuff for me and just spit out an extension file. So that's the idea. I haven't written most of this extension yet. Right now I just have sort of a proof of concept more than anything. But I think I'll get to it soon, because it is sort of scratching an itch for me. Then once I have it working, I also want to provide some options to just self-host your extension on GitHub. Once you've packaged the Chrome extension, heck, let's just push it up to a new branch on GitHub, and then you can point people right there. You don't even have to submit it to the Chrome extension, application, web store, gallery, whatever. All of that. And then once you've hosted it on GitHub, we could actually do all of the updating stuff for you. So you can give extensions a URL to check for updates. And if they find updates, they'll silently update. So you don't get that stuff that you have with Firefox, where it's popping up asking you to update, and you have to register it with the official provider or whatever. So I think if you use the GitHub tool, we can also just throw that update URL into the manifest and do all of that for you without you really putting in any extra work. I'm thinking about maybe also exporting it to .js, which is sort of a Greasemonkey alternative. The GitHub guys are all about .js. I think they wrote it. It's a similar idea. In this one, you just keep the JS files in a special, the .js directory in your home directory. And then those are loaded up. I think do you name them with the site you want to use? I don't remember exactly how it works. But anyways, seems like since we're packaging it to now 2 outputs, let's just go ahead and package it to 3. Let you write 1 Greasemonkey script and just have it distributed however your end users might like. OK. Oh, right. Maybe I'll let you write Greasemonkey scripts in CoffeeScript because I love CoffeeScript and it seems cool. And we could just throw one more optional step into the workflow. OK, so that's it for gems. I don't know if I should stop for questions now or just go on through with the next half of the talk. Go on. OK, I will go on. OK, so I showed you a bunch of, these are pretty simple, small little gems I just kind of would hack out on a couple afternoons of work, whatever. And so hopefully you've now seen that it's really not that hard to build and publish a gem. I always get a little intimidated, I guess, when it's like, when we start talking about packaging software, it's like, oh, well, gosh, that's not just me and my computer anymore, and it's not just my payment system that's handling hundreds of thousands of dollars of payments every day. It's now I'm putting on the internet. Like, this is serious. But it's not really that intimidating. So there are some gems that are out there that help you package up Ruby gems. The 2 most popular ones are Ho and Jeweler. They're kind of similar ideas. They're pretty comprehensive. They're very powerful, I think. But I always felt like they're sort of a little pushy. They really demand all this stuff of you. They want you to set all these settings and organize your files in a certain way and this and that. And that always kind of bothers me. You also have to require Jeweler or Ho from your own gems, so suddenly you're depending on them, which kind of bugged me too, I guess. And it all just starts to get a little complicated and confusing, and then you look at the documentation for Ho, and now we're back to being intimidated. And there's a few others out there. There's some simple, there's some stuff you can just copy into your rake file, which is better, but then you have to have that in your rake file and maintain it and stuff. Nothing that really I thought was all that great. But there's another way, and it's actually something that you probably already have on your computer. Bundler. You hopefully all have Bundler, because Bundler is great. And you use Bundler for all of your projects with your gem files. But one thing that you might not know the bundler can do is it can actually do some gem management. So we want to start a new gem, so we do bundled gem, and then the name of our gem. And it's going to create a bunch of just a little skeleton for us to get started. So it makes the folder, makes all the files. It even sets up a Git repo for you because it just knows that you're going to want to use Git. So let's look at what files it creates for you. This first one is the rake file. It's very simpler. It's just calling the bundler helper to give you the bundler gem task, which we'll get to a little bit later. It gives you a git ignore file with the things that you're probably going to want to ignore in the process of building your gem. So when you package it up and stuff, you're probably going to want to ignore these files. So now we have in lib buzzfizz version.rb. There's just this simple little snippet of code. And this is just your package version number. It puts it here so that it can go and pull it out whenever it wants to tag something or name a file or do whatever. I don't think you have to go with this idiom, but it's pretty nice. I've never had a problem with it. It seems like a good enough place to put it. It gives you just a simple little stub in buzzfizz.rb where you would probably be putting your code, or at least be putting some requires for your code. The gem file is, again, very simple. all it does is call gemspec, which tells bundler that when you do bundle install to go actually look at the gemspec to get your dependencies. This is good because now your dependencies are only in the gemspec, so both bundler and the gem building stuff can use that and can know about the dependencies. So this is the big thing bundler does for you, is your gemspec file. So starting from the top, first it pushes the lib file onto your, or the lib directory into your path, which you're probably going to want for all of your requiring needs. It pulls in the version file that we talked about to get the version number, and then it just sets up the standard gem specification. I should have mentioned the other thing that kind of bugs me about Ho and Jeweler is that you, instead of getting gem specification, you get a Ho specification or a Jeweler specification, and they're like almost the same but not quite, and it's just not for me, I guess. So this is just a vanilla gem spec. So now you can go through, and they've helpfully marked out all the things that you should probably be changing. So you should put your name in and your email. It's going to pull in the version automatically. It sets up most of the settings that you don't need to worry about so that they're just correct already. You add a summary and a description. Probably your RubyForge project is going to be named the same thing as your gem, but you can change it if it's not. And then they just use basically the Git index to decide which files go in your gem, which should work. If it doesn't, go ahead and change it. No one's stopping you. So probably one of the first things that you'll want to do is add the dependencies. So you just throw these lines into your gem spec. This is all, again, standard gem stuff. And I should say, actually, if you go to rubygems.org, the documentation is really good. And I swear it didn't used to be really good, but sometime in like the past month or two, I think it changed because I went back, and it's actually really nice. There's a quick start and a reference, and it's all very readable, and you don't have to wade through these weird, dense documents like I remember doing. So either I was looking in the wrong place, or it's good, or they've changed it. So if you want to know, if you're trying to set up your gem spec and there's something that's confusing, check there. It'll probably have an easy answer for you. Okay, so we've set up our gem spec. We've written a little bit of code, whatever. We're ready to go. So if we just look at all the available rake tasks, these are the ones that bundler is giving us. The two most useful, as far as our gem goes, are this top one, rake build, which is just going to build it locally and give you a gem file. So if you just want to test before you actually release it, you can install from this local gem file and do whatever you need to do. And then rake release is the one we're going to use, which is just like a painless releasing of your gem. It's very cool. It's my favorite thing. So if you don't have a RubyGems account, stop now and go make one. It's easy. You just go to rubygems.org and do sign up. They'll ask you a few things. Once you've done that, you're going to want to get your machine authorized. So the easiest way to do this, I thought, was just to do gem push. You can just do this from your home directory or whatever. It'll give you an error, but it's not. You'll still authorize your machine. You'll still get what you want. So you just enter your email and your password, and it talks to RubyGems, and it saves it somewhere special. So if you've done that, we can now release our gem. So we just do rake release. It's going to look at the version number that we've put in the file. So remember to bump your version number if you have already released. And then it's just going to go do everything for you. So it builds the gem file. It puts it in the package directory, which should be ignored. It adds a git tag for your version number. It pushes all that stuff up to GitHub. And then it actually pushes your gem out to RubyGems. And if this runs successful, you're all set. You can go to RubyGems. You can search for your gem, and ta-da, you're a gem author. So not that hard, not that intimidating, I hope. You can do it without even installing any extra stuff because you already have bundler. That's my favorite way to do it. Maybe you will enjoy using Ho or Jeweler or some other tool, but I like it simple. I like it without any extra stuff, so I just do it with bundler. So thanks. I should take this moment to also thank my company, Amco Online, because they let me do a lot of this stuff on company time, which is pretty cool. Every once in a while we hire people, so if you're interested, just get in touch with me or watch the SD Ruby mailing list. We'll probably post jobs there. All right.